Hello and welcome back. My next guest needs no introduction. Martin Wolf is Chief Economics Commentator for the Financial Times. Martin, hello.
Hello.
It's nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. I wanted to split this interview for the next 10 to 12 minutes in two parts, really, but I think they're correlated. I want to talk about the events in the Middle East that are happening now, but started overnight, and then see what happened to the dollar and see whether that's indicative of something that is something that's just going to be general about the US dollar in the next 6 months to a couple of years. Coming to the Middle East now, there is something new here in the sense that Israel, it appears to be emboldened. We don't get the sense that Israel feels the need for support from its allies, either militarily or in terms of moral support. Would you agree?
I think, as I understand what is happening, and having followed this moderately closely over quite a long time, that this is new, a new moment in two fundamental dimensions. The first is this is an attack which they've obviously been thinking about for a very long time, really a long time, on Iran's nuclear capacity and potential. They've been very concerned about this, particularly has been concerned about this for a very long time. He tried to get George W. Bush to act upon this. So we're talking about almost 20 years ago. Throughout, he's been held back. He has waited for American support and American action. He hasn't done anything. Now, he's explicitly attacking Iran's nuclear program, and without, so far as one can see, American approval. And that's the second dimension. The first is that he's done this attack with that objective. It's not defensive in an immediate sense. It's a long-term strategic target. And the second thing is that they're doing it, as far as I can see, from what we're being told, without US approval. And that is, I think, something genuinely new.
If that would be very surprising, surely, for such a massive attack. They've used 100 fighter jets, I think, which is most of their air force. I can't think of any other strike that's used that many planes in recent memory anyway.
So far as I understand, that is correct. It's clearly, I mean, it's a genuine strategic assault. Most people I know about with any expertise here, I'm not one, argue that it is actually impossible for Israel, possibly impossible even for the United States, to eliminate Iran's nuclear program in this way, and therefore it's futile. But that just makes it more interesting. The objective is extraordinarily large.
Surely if the US government approved of this attack, they would be saying so, especially as there are ongoing talks between all of the parties at the moment quite regularly.
Well, I've assumed that they possibly didn't know, or that and anyway, they didn't approve. So far as we have understood, though this may mean nothing, Trump has really worked quite hard to reach a deal with Iran over the nuclear program. It would seem very strange if that's what he's trying to do, even if he's being frustrated, that he would simultaneously give Israel a green light to make this attack, which one would have thought will make Iran more defensive and make them feel even more that, well, we need this sort of shield. But what's going on here, I don't fully understand.
Were you surprised when Donald Trump withdrew from the Iranian nuclear deal? And is that responsible for some of the problems here?
What do you mean, all the way back in 2016?
Yeah.
I wasn't surprised. I thought it was a big mistake, very controversial issue at the time. Everybody here in Europe I spoke to thought that the Iranians were abiding by the terms of the deal, that they'd got a good path to bringing this nuclear program under control and bringing Iran back into the fold of sort of civilized nations. So they were surprised, and they were all in Europe. They were surprised. I was not in that sense. But of course, it's clear that Trump's effort to replace it with what he called maximum pressure, very penal sanctions on Iran, failed. I mean, they didn't eliminate the program. That's absolutely clear. And relations with Iran were not made any easier to handle as a result. So it is clear that failed. But I think Netanyahu is probably very concerned that the Americans are going to do a deal with Iran, like that early agreement which Obama brought into place. And this attack is, among other things, an attempt to make reaching such a deal between Iran and the United States impossible.
Yes. Coming to the dollar now, can't have escaped many people's attention that the US dollar, in this kind of geopolitical event, you could expect the US dollar to strengthen, especially from a position of weakness over the last few months. In fact, the opposite occurred. The dollar has been going down. It went down 1% over a period of about 24 hours. That must have surprised quite a few traders and quite a few commentators. Do you think that the political events, the things that the US government has introduced in the last 2 months, since it's arrived, in fact, do you think the politics that they are implementing is undermining the US dollar?
I think it is very likely that it is. One of my rules is never really to comment on short-term movements of currencies, because my own view is nobody understands them, but I certainly don't understand them. I'm not in the markets. I'm not a trader. And there are things going on here, often technical things which affect movements of currency, which I would not be aware of. I'm not even a reporter in these areas. So I always stress this. But the key point, I think, is this. This is the background. The US continues to run a very large current account deficit, and it has a very large amount of debt it has to sell into the world, which is one of the major counterparts of that current account deficit. What that means is there have to be net purchases by the rest of the world consistently to sustain the dollar. That's how it works. And for it to rise, there have to be very large net purchases driving it up. And for this reason, people have to have confidence in the dollar all the time. I mean, because they have to just keep buying US financial liabilities and the currency in the process. Normally, when a country goes protectionist, you expect the currency to rise because the country in question spends less money on foreign currency. Its currency should rise. That's not been happening. So I think what has been going on in the background is people are saying, if we look at American trade policy, we look at American foreign relations, we look at American fiscal policy and the future fiscal policy, and we're not sure this is a very friendly country. He's talking about taxing foreign capital, which is certainly not very friendly. It is running a plan to run a huge deficit forever, so the borrowing will go on forever. And they constantly criticize us. So if we buy the dollar, we're going to be very vulnerable to all sorts of sanctions that they might impose. So I think adding all these things together, people feel this is it's not very sensible to put a vast amount of our assets, even more of our assets than we already have, in the US, which doesn't look like a well-run, stable, friendly power, or at least less than it used to. And I think that's the background we're seeing. And I think it's a perfectly reasonable conclusion.
In just the last few weeks, several countries who had planned to purchase F-35 US fighters have actually cancelled their order. Do you think the soft power of the United States is being eroded by US government policy?
Well, personally, I think that it's been cratered. I mean, it's not just eroded. Ultimately, US soft power rested first and foremost in absolute confidence that the country would keep its word in everything. That's what relying on a great power means. Its word on how it managed its public finances, that it wouldn't default. And yet some of the officials have been talking about what is essentially a default, that they wouldn't impose sudden taxes on assets held there, that they would stick by their security commitments, that they would stick by their trade policy commitments. Some of them very recent, like the deal with US, Canada, Mexico, which was just agreed under the first Trump administration. So people think this country isn't reliable and it isn't friendly, and they're right. It's obvious they're right. And so, naturally, people are thinking, well, if we get an American plane, we need the spare parts. We need the servicing. We need to be sure it will be there. Can we be confident of that? This is a long-term purchase. It's the core of our air defenses. Now, of course, they're asking questions about this. That's true all over the world, not just in China, which is self-evident, but also in Europe. It's obvious if you talk to people that they're thinking about all these things all the time. And yes, and so tragically, unnecessarily, horrifically, from my point of view, the soft power of the United States, on which we all depended, is being eroded on a daily basis.
There are some reports from some economists of very low levels in the US dollar against the euro. Are you meeting lots of people who are talking about this, who are concerned about future levels of the dollar?
Yes, I think it is an issue. I mean, I think the broader issue, which I have written about, and others, of course, have written about, there's a new book on this by my very good friend Ken Rogoff of Harvard, which is the future of the dollar itself. I mean, I don't mean just its level, but will people be willing to hold it as the major reserve asset, as the major form of international money? Will they continue to be willing to make most of their transactions, both on capital account and trade account, through New York? Are they comfortable with using accounts in American banks? All these things come into issue when the government seems erratic and wildly unpredictable. And of course, among other things, if the use of the dollar diminishes, I certainly don't expect it to cease to be the dominant currency in the foreseeable future. But if it diminishes, people hedge, people use other currencies as well. People rely on other vehicles like crypto or the digital renminbi or the euro. If that happens, of course, it will erode the position of the dollar, not destroy it. It will erode it. And it will mean that the influence that the US can exercise through the dollar will be eroded. And that's part of American soft power.
The much reported BRICS currency, we're not sure if it's going to happen. It's been talked about for at least 5 years. That still hasn't been issued. Are you surprised about that?
No, I never thought it was at all plausible for a whole host of reasons, which would take quite a long time to explain. But multinational currencies of any kind are extremely difficult to create. The only example that matters is the euro. It took basically 15 years of discussion, worked out agreement in the context of a club of countries that have been already together since 56, or even earlier, arguably, which were deeply committed to integration. None of this applies to the BRICS. None of it. And to just take the most obvious point, the two most important countries in the BRICS from an economic point of view, not security, are India and China. And India and China have some quite big problems between them. So the idea that they would easily produce a genuine currency, not just some sort of token, but a genuine currency that could operate as an autonomous currency, is completely fanciful. Maybe some form of stablecoin, multinational stablecoin, could be envisaged. Very, very difficult to do, one backed by multiple currencies, very difficult to understand. But I've never been able to take that idea seriously any more than I've been able to take, though lots of my friends do, the special drawing right in the IMF, which was introduced in the 60s. For that reason, seriously, in the end, in the modern world, by which I mean the last 2 centuries anyway, currencies that matter are sovereign currencies because they're backed by sovereign states. So if there is a replacement, it will be the RMB. Won't happen anytime soon because the Chinese don't want that to happen. They don't want to lose control. Or the euro, if and only if the Eurozone becomes a political union, which is also very far from happening, but at least much closer than with the BRICS.
Martin, well, thank you very much. There's too many questions and not enough time, but maybe we'll be able to do this again another time. Thank you very much, Martin, for joining us.
A pleasure.
Bye-bye.